Felt weird doing that.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
And we're live. This is The Human Condition. I'm Vince Orlando.
I'm Steve.
I'm Sean.
How's it going, Sean? How's it
Going
going,
pretty
Steve?
good.
I'm wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah. Sean came in with some experience in jokerism that we don't have. I'm envious.
Yeah. I saw the movie today. It's a great movie, and I ain't gonna put no spoilers out there or anything. A guy at work said that Joaquin should probably get a Academy Award for it. Slash, probably the best male performance he's seen ever. Now, I'm a movie buff, and I've seen a lot of movies going all the way back to like the 40s. I wouldn't go as far to say that it's the best male performance I've ever seen, but it probably ranks in the top 5 in like the last top 15 years, and he definitely deserves an Academy Award for that role.
I've always loved that dude. Always. I'm excited to see it. That's our little mini plug for a movie that doesn't need our plug.
Yeah,
But I might go see it right after this. It's one that I'm excited for. I hear it's a nice. It's not a comic book film, but it's a play on mental illness
Yeah.
at its core,
Yeah.
and I think there's an important message.
How does he compare to Heath Ledger?
darker,
Not the same though. Right?
not the same.
More real, darker, or
More real,
fantastically
more real,
darker?
more real dark. Like
Sounds really interesting. I can see this now.
if you have, like, I don't it if you have a substance abuse issue or any kind of mental illness in the
PTSD.
past,
People are walking
you're
around
going to relate to this a lot.
in a
and
deep,
like-
visceral way.
Yeah,
That's what I
and
heard.
like it brought up like a lot of like I'm watching this on the matinee at like 10 a.m. There's only like 4 people in the theater, and as I'm watching it, like it brought me back to like when I was like 2021, and these experiences that he was experiencing, like I could completely relate, and I could relate to the mental illness.
Right.
And so like it was just some fucked up shit, man. And then like when I got out of the theater, I went and told my dad because he doesn't get to the movie theater very often anymore with the COPD and the emphysema and stuff. But he taught me like everything I know about movies, and he was like, "Ooh, you got to a matinee during the week." And it was a good one, and then like I was telling them about the movie, and it's very political. It's a political statement movie,
Right. That's
And
what I heard.
and it's very loud. The statement is very loud.
That's So that's a must see.
Must see.
Yeah,
Must see.
that's a must see. I've known it was going to be a must see. Joaquin's amazing. I tried to get him in Life Goes On. Actually,
I love
I couldn't
Batman,
afford him.
and obviously I
But
love
they
Joker.
entertain
so-
it. All right. Well, we're the subject today is interdependence. Interdependence is the core of interdependence is the recognition in the dependent self. So you as a dependent human being recognize that yes, I'm capable of survival without anybody else for the most part, right? I can go about my daily business and fluctuate in and out of relationships pretty much self sufficiently. But I recognize that there's a benefit in others, that there's things that I can't accomplish on my own that I can through strong, long lasting relationships with other people. It's extremely important, and the universe at large, well, I can't say the universe because I only know this planet, but the planet at large lacks these types of relationships. For the most part, we're a codependent, egocentric society, right? So I was taught in PTSD therapy, there's 3 ways you can be as a human being. You can be selfish, egocentric. You can be self-full, which is independent. selfful, you take care of yourself, and then you can be selfless, which would fall into the realm of codependence. There has to be some semblance of self as a human being, right? So you cannot have true interdependence. You can't have these types of relationships without first being a dependent human being. The mistake people make in relationships, and I'm not just talking about romantic relationships, although this typically gets pushed into that category. I'm talking about business relationships, friendships, between a parent and a child, teacher, student, all these relationships, we should always strive for interdependence. The problem is, predominantly, people are looking for this other person to fill a void that's in them. So we get caught in these cyclical traps of codependence, to where I play a role, you play a role. Because we play these roles, we spin in this circle until eventually the relationship fizzles out. Then we move on to the next one, wonder why it's happening again. That's the cycle that most people find themselves in. It's hard to speak about this in a romantic relationship, because to say, well, yeah, I love you, and that even the way I said it is kind of, but I love you. If we were to break up, I'm going to live, you'll live, I'll go through a period of grief, but I'm going to be okay. People don't want to hear that. I do. I prefer to hear that in all relationships. No, I'll be okay without you. I don't want this to end. But only a truly independent person can say that. Because if you're dependent, you're always looking for angles to try to keep whatever relationships you can centered around you to serve your own selfish desire.
It sounds like detached appreciation.
Detached appreciation is being fully independent. Detached, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, like, like I love you and everything, but like I will survive if,
I appreciate us in this moment. I
Right.
appreciate what we have. If there ever comes a point to where I feel like we're not growing together anymore, we're going to grow apart. And that's just the natural flow of life. If I'm in the natural flow of life, we'll just grow apart naturally. I don't have to force anything. I'll be okay. I know you'll be okay. It might not feel good. We'll navigate our way through that. It's even with death. And I take this back. For me, this is something that I always have to go back to my children. And I hate using the example of bad things happening to my kids, because I don't want to put that into the universe. But if I think about the worst possible pain I can be subject to, it's that something bad happens there. And for whatever reason, one or both of my children are out of my life. That's suffering that's unimaginable to me. But if I truly want to walk the spiritual path, not just talk it, I have to look at, okay, if the worst was to happen, would I be okay? The answer is yes. The answer is yes. I'll navigate my way through it. Not in a cold way, and I'd definitely be devastated to my core, but I would want the same for them too. And I think I know I try to, I do instill, and no, I try, because I can't say for sure what's actually going through their heads and how they're internalizing the lessons that I try to give them, but I would hope the same too, and that's true unconditional love. If I'm gone out of this relationship for whatever given reason, I want you to thrive in whatever relationships you acquire beyond me. Whether it's death or whether it's just we grew apart, I want you to thrive. I truly want that in people. There's some people in business that I can't stand. I can't be around those people. People that were friends previous, I wish the best for them. I want them to be successful. Some of them aren't. It's not my fault. I can't get involved in that. But I truly hope that people see beyond, whatever fractured our relationship, and they move into new relationships and they can be okay. If you're a fraction of a person, you won't be. What you'll get are lessons, or you'll get cycles that repeat themselves continuously. And you'll always wonder why. Until you get to the point where you got to evaluate yourself as, well, do I truly love myself? Do I truly like myself? Can I stand to be around myself? Am I seeking somebody to fill voids? Like, all these questions are hard questions that, number one, ask, but then to answer them is even more difficult.
I gotta say, you said that's sort of a spiritual way of thinking. You said if you want to do the spiritual thing, you would have to look at it like this. And what you described after that, to me, just came across as the rational way to look at things. I didn't see a spiritual benefit out of it. I saw a rational benefit because if you do that, you have value from both people and you get what you want.
Well, it's not about getting what you want, it's that you exist interdependent of each other, but you both provide value to each other as individuals. So there is a deeply spiritual component, and you are at risk of you can become nihilistic in that viewpoint, in that you can use it to just get what you want, but that's selfish. That's being selfish. That's different. So what I'm talking about is non-attachment, and that's a deeply spiritual concept from Buddhism and other spiritual traditions. But what it means is I'm independent. I recognize my independence. I also recognize that you can provide value to my existence. I'm not attached to the outcome of our relationship. So if it's romantic, if we break up, it's just what it is. Non-attachment means, I'll use my kids again as an example. If something bad were to happen to my kids, who am I to say that that shouldn't have happened, right? If I embrace impermanence, which I try my best to embrace impermanence, the universe is ever changing, especially the realm of phenomena, which is the realm that we exist in. It's always changing, always going to change. Now, I can get selfish about my desires, and that I want my kids to live forever. I want them to thrive. I want them to take every lesson I give them, and I want them to be the best. That's not what life is. People get sick. People get cancer. Now, if I'm attached to the idea that somebody I love should not get cancer, I'm not going to be very useful to them when they're at their worst, right? Because I'm going to suffer as a result of something that I'm attached to the idea that I don't think they should have. So it really is a deeply spiritual concept. You're in danger of veering onto the side of the nihilistic viewpoint, which would be more selfish. I can use you to get what I want. That's different. That's completely different.
What would be the difference between, say, you and I are rock climbers, and we go to climb rocks together? That's what we do. We get in the car, we go together. But when we're on the rock face, you're not doing anything for me. I'm not doing anything for you. But we have a common goal. We both want to get to the top of this mountain. Right?
Is it a goal or a bond?
That's sort of what I was getting at. There's a shared goal between us,
The goal,
but we can't help one another.
yeah, but there's going to be an energetic. If I have the same goal as you, that's going to automatically create a bond. If we're both rock climbers and we go in the car together and everything's cool and we're friends and all that, like the bond is there. And although we can't help each other, I still want you to get to the top of that mountain.
And that's sort of the point I'm making is
I'm gonna
the
push
bond
you.
interpersonal?
Oh, of course.
The bond is really where it's at. The goal is just the goal. Now, you can't be attached to the outcome of that goal because there's going to be those times where you don't make it to
rock
the
climbing,
top.
you really need to be attached to the goal to getting to the top.
But I'll tell you,
But you may not.
if you get into some trouble though, like I'm gonna be able to help. Like I'll help you, call that codependence or whatever. But like
Well, that's not codependence.
I'm throwing the rope down and be like, dude, you still getting to the top of this mountain.
Yeah, you're there for each other. You're there for each other. You don't need each other to accomplish the goal. You may need one of you may need the other if one of you starts to fall, and that's relationships in life. So if I'm in a truly interdependent relationship with my business partner, with my girlfriend, with my kids, I don't view their failures, and I would hope, and I can't say that they're truly independent, but if I view myself as an independent person, I have to view their falls in the way that you just said it as opportunities for growth rather than you're holding me back. Kids are a perfect example. Parents are so quick to lash out at their kids for, okay, you failed in school. And they get angry. And that's where it stops, at the anger. Well, you're just not supposed to do that. There's no lesson there.
The lesson is if you do good in school, I won't be angry at you.
That's the only
It's that
lesson.
negative reinforcement.
And
I
that's
think we've all had that.
Yeah.
Right, and that's not that doesn't do that. There's no value there. Now, if you say, got an F in school, and this is me contemplating as a parent, how can I use this opportunity as a way to enhance growth? There's
You got to start a conversation, right?
Well,
what is
there's
wrong?
there's a genuine there's a
not
genuine
understand
love there. Well, yeah, exactly. So there's a more so of a it's more of a curious state of existence when you're in interdependence. So here's the thing: everything in the realm of phenomena only exists in relationship to everything else. Everything. At the core of the subatomic particle, it only exists in relationship to the subatomic particle next to it, whose electron it bounces off of. Then something happens, cause and effect. Everything exists in relationship to one another. The strength of those relationships is based on in subatomic particles. You know, they have their own thing, right, going on. But they're not humans. We're complex systems. We're complex subatomic systems. But
That'd be really fucked up if
Some
they did have their little
complex
lives.
subatomic systems.
I mean, but that's what we are. Truly.
I know. I don't think about that when I'm like in my
See,
relationships and my friendships.
I got problems. I do.
You know, I don't
Yeah,
like
I have as well.
it's.
I
You
get
know,
really confused though. So you're probably doing it right.
I would. I don't know. Like the thing is, for me, I really enjoy my own company. Number one, like, and that took a long time to get there.
That is
But,
not
like,
easy to do.
Took most of my life.
Yeah, but I really do enjoy my own company. So like, when it comes to like relationships or friendships, like I can go do my own thing and be perfectly fine, and you know that's just the way it's almost more simplistic, you know. When it comes to friendships and relationships and all that stuff, I always try to help the other person be better, see more, change the perspective, enhance the journey that they're experiencing on the planet, however that is. I don't look at it as codependency. You know, it's like sponsorship in 12-step recovery.
That's not though. It's only if it's filling a void in you selfishly, then it becomes codependent.
Right. The void is like I could say that this is part of my life's purpose.
Purpose is different.
Purpose is different,
Yeah.
but it doesn't feel like something. It's kind of like something that I'm good at. You know, it's like I'm good at doing like the human, like, here you go, and like lifting someone up to seeing that where they're at, like you can like go up and over whatever obstacles in front of you, no matter what.
See, and that's so there's another example I use. If I see a child in a street and the child's about to be hit by a vehicle, more than likely I'm going to jump out there. I'll put my own life at risk to save that child. Now the question, and this is kind of a thought experiment you need to ask yourself in this thought experiment is, am I jumping out to save this child because I couldn't live with myself if I didn't do that? I would feel so guilty and shameful if I didn't do that. Or is it that I truly want this child to be safe and at the expense of my own safety? So there's a difference there, and it's worth exploring in oneself. And these are the types of questions I ask me in all relationships. Am I helping you because I just, it feels good to see you excel? Or am I helping you because I have some issues with people abandoning me, and I'm afraid that you might leave. I have to please everybody because you might leave me. You know what I mean? That's how deep I take it.
See, I take it to the point where like I truly believe that like I want everyone to pay it forward.
That's a spiritual way of being.
That whole
Yeah.
concept, like
That's the selflessness.
yeah, whatever I show you,
self-full,
yeah, self-full.
because it's not completely. It's reciprocal.
So
because I know how it is when you provide service, it boosts your spirituality. It takes you up a notch.
By doing it, it's no longer for my own frequency or my vibration to be raised. I do it.
Well,
to
that's not
raise
the intent,
right.
but it does it.
It does it probably by default.
By
a little
default,
bit.
yeah, default.
A little bit.
Yeah,
you
but it's
know?
not the intent. And that's
But it's
important.
like, if, you know, by helping you change your frequency and your vibration, like I'm almost like putting it on the universe that you're gonna go do that for someone else.
Oh, yeah, that's right. So the intent is pure,
Right.
and that's the difference.
And that the people you show do it, and then it moves on, and then that's how you create a movement, and that's how you really change the fucking world.
I'm being the change. I'm doing
Right.
my part in the universe to be a light. I was in it was Life on Fire with Glenn. This is all about goals and how you set your life on fire, basically. Before we move on, I just want to plug the Twitter for anybody who wants to chime in on this, because I know people have thoughts. You can join our new Twitter. It's HC Podcast 313. Throw questions. Steve will be monitoring, and we'll take them.
And you can also hit us up on our Facebook page where you're watching this, and I'll catch you there too. Set your world on fire.
So yeah, so life on fire, and it came back to what is my goal, and I can't think of another goal other than to be a light. I would like to embody Christ consciousness before I leave the earth plane, truly embody it, to know what that feels like, to walk in that space of complete purity, because I'm still bogged down by my ego. Right? I still have to fight every day to. Now I don't want to say it's such a fight anymore, but I have to find ways to have my higher self, which I feel is the absolute truth, the things that I'm in touch with there. I have to find ways for it to work in tandem with my egoic self. And that's the trick to navigating this life for me.
Would you let go of everything to get it?
That's the thing, is the ego.
Would you give up the job? Would you give up all your responsibilities and
Not
you sit
yet.
on a park bench
Not yet.
until you got it?
Not yet, and I don't know that you have to, though. That's the
No,
thing.
you definitely do not.
I don't know that you have to grow the long beard, move to the mountains, and I don't know that you have to. That's the thing I'm talking about, is in your independence and your strive, every goal of every relationship should be interdependence. It should be. Win-win. How do we find a win-win? We can be of service to each other without being selfish, right? We can. It is possible. I know it seems like a.
Well, it depends on what outcome you're going for.
Well, interdependence. If win-win, compromise is no longer a problem. If
Well,
you're
if it
going
gets
for
both of us in the same place, then
interdependence.
interdependence is what we want. But if it's one, you got to do one thing, I got to do another to hit our goals. I mean,
You're the
That's
only
more
married
selfish,
man
right?
here. You're the only married man here. Is your marriage interdependent? When you think of your wife and the relationship and how
Well,
it
you can't
started.
ask them that live.
Well,
He's got to go home.
well, I didn't mean to put you on the
No,
spot.
it's more of an interdependent thing as you're describing it, because we have a common goal.
Right.
We set common goals. We don't lose ourselves in one another. We don't really base our happiness on one another.
That's
It's
hugely
more of a-
important in
Yeah.
a relationship.
That's a big one
Usually
right there.
You know, we're both old. We've both been in a lot of relationships. We both tanked a lot of relationships, and we knew better. And of course, we slide back into the old
That's
ways.
the ego, and we all do.
It's impossible not to. You know, that's like, it seems to be the default way for a Western civilization, a United States person to live, is to be egoistic and all about me.
Well-
Well, it's advertised to me 24 hours a day that I'm the most important person, not you.
Well, and this goes back to duality, which we've discussed at length, but the fact that we come into this universe reliant on our caregivers.
For years.
So how could we not be egocentric? It's almost like a twisted joke.
And
In
you are
the
most
human
important
condition,
person.
right, is you have to, your whole entire function is survival. How can I fulfill my needs? How can I fulfill my needs? And then through relationships with other people, through trauma, through peak experiences, that egocentrism hopefully starts to unravel, right? Even things like addiction, you know, traumas like that can rock you to your core to the point to where you really have to evaluate yourself and you start to look at these things and be like, I was living wrong because of this, and this. It's extremely, it's the paradox. It's the human paradox. As you come into the earth plane as an egocentric being, but still somehow you kind of know there's another truth, right? You kind of know that through when you feel unconditional love for your child for the first time, or you get in that relationship and you feel love for that person for the first time, or you lose somebody close to you and you know what it's like to feel that type of loss. You get these emotions that are not really taught for us to in this society which you're talking about. It's not really embraced that we should feel these things. We brush them off.
I think there is a culture aspect to those feelings. For example, just to go off of that, when somebody dies in this small Asian country that I'm thinking of that I don't remember the name of, they have celebrations. They do not get unhappy about it. They do not grieve. They celebrate the person's life. Here, we lose somebody close to us. It could be years that we grieve and go through PTSD even.
Mm-hmm.
So I do think there is a culture aspect to that. And what if you were born, you were put on an island, and you were taken care of by somebody that you never saw? What would happen to you then? What would that baby be like? That's always interesting. Would they have the same relationships as we have, the same relationship goals that we have?
Well, they couldn't, right? And that is what's sociologically, it's a completely different environment. But what's interesting too is depending on how nurturing that person is. Are you saying it's just two of them on the island?
Sure, but the baby never sees the person, never interacts with them.
That
Just
baby will
gets
die.
taken care of.
That baby will die if the baby's not. And that was during World War II. There was a study done.
Oh God, the Nazis.
Well, no. So obviously there was a lot of orphans, right? Kids were displaced during World War II over in Europe. So they did a study, and they found out that kids that were well tended to, right? They were fed 3 meals a day, whatever else it takes, back then, whatever you thought it took to make. They were given survival. That's it.
Mhm.
They weren't nurtured. They weren't held. Those kids died. They died. Now the kids that were nurtured, that were held for at least an hour a day, nurtured by the caretakers, whoever they were, didn't even have to be close to them, but just held them. We need human contact, and that's where interdependence comes in, and that's why it's careful to not be codependent, because it's a distorted need. It's a selfish need. Where in interdependence, I can look at you and say, you have true value. It's an unconditional love. You have true value in this universe. Maybe we can work together towards a common goal. Maybe we can't, but you recognize the door. I mean, and I was talking about that when it comes to subatomic particles and being in a relationship. That door has true value. It allows us to shut this, have this conversation. If we look at anything, there's value to it. There's value to
everything then.
right, and that's where so I don't think you start to recognize the true value in everything that surrounds you until you're fully okay with yourself.
But you could say that there's value in every experience that you have in every human contact.
100%. Even what we would call a bad relationship, if you learn from it, there's value.
Well, yeah. I mean, I've learned from a lot of bad relationships.
I guess even if you didn't, there's value for somebody. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Maybe not for you at the time, but there's value there. So.
Well, I learned like what I don't want for the next one.
Right.
And even in friendships too.
Friendships.
Because there's a lot of users, and when we were all drinking and using, a lot of people based their friendships on what they could get out of this friendship.
Right. Yeah.
Like
the party, the girl.
Yeah,
or,
like
whatever.
Your friends that were super wealthy, it was like, they always got a bag of weed, and they always got the drink, and like, pick me up, pick me up. That's my boy.
Yeah.
Yeah. When I was on the other side of the street, like not really strapped with that much cash, that's how a lot of friendships and bonds were perceived or made or whatever. As I got older, I allowed the universe to just kind of do what it do.
Right.
You know, it's interesting. I've learned not to expect anything.
That's a big part of Buddhism right there.
Non-attachment.
Expectations. Yeah.
You know, like I really, like I place no expectation on any form of brotherhood or relationship. And so I just like am this being that's enjoying the journey.
That's the strongest type of relationship you can have when you just allow space for, and we're talking about humans, right? Allow space for the human to grow. That's it. And you know what? If you're doing things that are just, they don't work for me, well, I still want you to grow, but just grow over there. You know what I mean? Honestly, but with love, not fuck out of here. Just, or sometimes you got to say that, but you know, it's all done with love, and there's curiosity to it. When I've walked out of bad relationships or been able to weasel my way out of them, I genuinely had curiosity. I remember in the past I would want people to fail because I would feel infringed upon. I would allow myself to play victim.
Yeah, if your
and I would
heart's broken, the first
that's the gut response, right? Why
Right.
should this happen to me?
well, like you know, we wish them bad relationships to come.
Oh, you'll see.
Yeah, you
You'll
know,
see. Wait,
like
you
I'm
get-
I'm over here bleeding,
Yeah.
you know, with a broken heart, and like, you know, but in all reality, like, I mean, I've learned a lot from each broken heart, and I've learned from each person that has moved on. You know, my best friend in high school passed away like when I was I was 21, and it was the first major, like there had been some family members that passed away, some great aunts and stuff, and uncles that just they got old, and you know, but he passed away, and I don't know. I really like the grieving. It didn't. I don't grieve much, and especially like in like the last 9 years with you know substance abuse and you know fentanyl and everything. There's been a lot of people that have OD'd real close to me and moved on. I look at us that it was a pleasure to know you
For this time.
for this
we,
time.
We had this time.
That we had this time in our journey, and that our spiritual contracts with the universe were able to mesh for how little time or how long a time that I take that, and that's the only real thing I can take with me when I leave the planet is all the bonds that I've made. I can't take no material, but I can take all my relationships and all the love and all the memories, and I take that with me.
You said spiritual contract?
Yeah.
What is that? Spiritual contract.
Depends
That's
on,
very
on what.
interesting.
Yeah, it depends on what you believe.
Yeah, it's a belief. So before we get to the planet, I believe that a lot of souls meet up and like come up with certain spiritual contracts to meet at this time on this planet.
To get the lessons that they need.
Yeah, or to help the experience and the journey move forward in whatever that may be. And you know, like you ever have like a friend that you swear could have been your brother in a previous life?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So in my world or my belief system, like I'm pretty much sure that before we got to this planet, like dude,
Figured that out
if we
ahead
got to
of
go to
time.
fucking Earth, like I want to run into you there and I want to hang out for a while, and you know, like I want you to be. Maybe I'm not in my. Maybe you won't end up in my own family tree, but you're still going to be in my family tree.
That's really close to the premise of Lost. If you remember that show?
I never
Yeah.
saw it.
Yeah, but I didn't see
In the
much of
beginning
it.
and the end, it was the same thing. Those people in the church, when they die, they collectively come back. They might be reincarnated,
Yeah.
but their souls stay together.
They stay in clusters.
So
clusters.
so your soul never dies. Your spirit, like once it's created, like you'll take another form after this life, you know. But like it's you like an old soul. Like if you ever run into like an old soul, like you can just tell that they've
They're
lived many,
Aged
many.
behind
Yeah.
beyond their years.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
It happens occasionally.
and I believe in the concepts that you're saying, and the fear of speaking about these types of things is people can easily push this off as woo woo, but there's even a scientific perspective to this, and that's we anybody who's a physicist or a scientist, you all know the first law of thermodynamics. Energy can neither be created or destroyed. What are we? We're this amalgamation of energy. What is consciousness? Well, we know it's energy. How do we know it? It can be measured. We don't know where it comes from, but it can be measured. So how could you not? Right? And so maybe the soul agreements aren't in the language that we know as humans, and but there's something called quantum entanglement. You're familiar with quantum entanglement. So once atoms, once subatomic particles bond, they can never be not one. So they can be separated physically. So once they bonded, they can be separate, and they've tested this in labs. They can be separated physically. But when you stimulate this one 7 miles down in the lab down the road, this proton or electron, stimulate this down the road, and this other one 7 miles away, they respond exactly the same, even though this one's the only one that's being stimulated. So they know this to be true. Quantum entanglement is true. And if you go back to the Big Bang, whether you're thinking the Big Bang, as God said, let there be light, or this singularity of this dense energy mass that
Cosmic boom.
boom, how could everything not be quantumly entangled? It has to be. Even if you're a scientist, it has to be. It has to be. So to me, that's beautiful. I look at, when I read Hawking, who's not a spiritual man, but when I read that, I see the spiritual undertones in that. My interest in quantum physics is what guided me into spirituality, because it just made sense. I'm like, holy shit. I'm like, that makes sense to me from an energy level. And I think I do, both sides of my brain, they communicate pretty well, right? So I can go logic and I can fall into the art, and they fluctuate back and forth. And I don't think there's any separation at all. Einstein would talk about, the theory of relativity. What does that say? At its core, everything is relative to the vantage point of the observer. Time, who some would argue moves in a linear straight arrow. No, it's only relative to the vantage point of the observer. And then quantum physics took it a step further and said, well, everything's based on observation.
I just want to mention that TJ Searcher hit us up on Facebook and mentioned that the Russian experiment is what you were talking about with the early neglect. And it actually,
Yep.
It
Yeah,
actually
yeah.
alters
Yeah.
kids' brains.
Yeah.
It's not a psychology thing, it's actually physical.
Yeah.
Physiologically.
Right.
They start rocking themselves to sleep and shit.
Well,
You know.
Or just don't live.
Yeah. They start shaking and then become malnourished, and then.
Well, my experience with PTSD, and I thank you for that book, because that book I couldn't put it down. The Body Keeps the Score. I learned so much about it, because I can go back inside. I can look at through therapy, I can stand outside of myself and I can look at myself objectively, almost like I'm studying a
I think
school
I
subject.
asked you. Did you ever do EMDR?
I did, yeah.
What'd you think of that?
I liked CPT work for me, cognitive processing therapy, because it's more cerebral, and so for me that was better. I think I was at a point to where I could grasp these concepts. So, but But yeah, thank you, TJ, for your comment, by the way. Yeah, EMDR is great, you know, but all it's doing is opening up new neural pathways, right? So it's trying to manipulate the brain through this eye movement into reopening neural pathways that have been blocked through trauma. Me, I'll take the risk. You know, I'll put myself in situations, and sometimes I fall flat on my face, but I will put myself in situations to where I can fail, and I know I can fail, and I know I'm being triggered, and I feel these things, but fuck it, I'm going to do it because I'm not going to live in a prison. You know, so EMDR, I think, will nudge you in that direction, and maybe I'm a little extreme in the way I do
Get
things.
you out of the prison.
It might edge you a little bit out of the prison by opening up new neural pathways, because really there's a blockage there. And, you know, when this part of the brain, and this is one of the most valuable things I took from that book. And so on the left side of your brain, you have the Broca section. The Broca section, when they would test these people in fMRIs, and they would feed them their traumatic event, you know, after therapy and figuring out, they would feed them their traumatic event while they're being scanned. And slowly they would start to see this part of the brain go offline. Now, this part of the brain is responsible for linear speech, linear thought. It's the part of the brain that goes offline also when you have a stroke. In contrast to that, the Brodmann section of the brain would light up. It just illuminate. This goes off, this goes on. The Brodmann section of the brain is the part of the brain that's responsible for taking in immediate information. It takes the pictures, sends it back to the amygdala, and it goes through the not the reptilian brain, but the middle brain. It goes through the middle brain for processing. So what that means is when you're being fed the trauma verbally, and your brain starts to internalize this shuts down, and you start to experience the traumatic event in real time. And there's nothing you can do about it. I didn't really understand that, but looking back on my past, I realized why nobody could tell me anything. Even when I was in a panic, it's the worst thing you can do or say to a person who's feeling really bad about themselves, really depressed, because their brain is playing tricks on them. They don't know what the fuck you're saying. And I didn't know what people were saying to me. And I don't even know how we got on this from interdependence, but it's, I know how we got on it, because I was talking about trauma and how I developed at a young age disorganized attachment because of the dynamic with my caregivers, right? You know, my mom was the sense of nurturing. My dad was the sense of the source, not the sense, the source of my trauma. Disorganized attachment that grew into distrust for everything, everybody. I became hyper vigilant in everything that I did. Developed this all or nothing thinking, and what else can that lead to? But you know, some traumatic times.
Because you basically had to care for yourself.
For the most part, yeah. And then there was a point at 9 years old where my brain really snapped, which I would have never thought was the snapping point for me. But through trauma, we got to that point, and that's really at 8, 9 years old, I became a man. So my childhood was gone at that point, and then I just, you know, and I wasn't interdependent. I was extremely codependent. But try telling me I was codependent. I remember being in a treatment center because I kept having these episodes, and I remember this, and this is only 6 years ago. I remember this therapist telling me that she said, you're yes, severe PTSD. You're also very codependent. I ain't fucking codependent. I don't rely on anybody for shit. Nah. All ego. Didn't realize what it was she was saying to me. But my entire life was predicated on how other people valued me, even if it was fake. I was like, well, no wonder I became a fucking actor. You know what I mean?
Like
I needed people to, I needed validation from, and I couldn't take validation on a small scale because I didn't feel worthy of the validation. And still, it's even hard to take compliments. So I didn't feel worthy of it. I had to make it on a wide scale from people who don't even know me, because I can feel good, but I don't have to get too close. You know what I mean? Because if they compliment me to my face, I'm fucked, because I don't really feel like I deserve it. None of this is conscious.
That is a very interesting dynamic right there.
And it's very common. I think, you know, because of my personality, maybe it was extreme. Hollywood's a fucking cesspool, man. You know,
reality is a fucking cesspool.
Well, it can be.
You know,
it can be.
Like,
But
I mean,
Hollywood is in reality.
like, I mean, if you come across, like, if you have deep conversations with like people out, if you can ever get people outside of your immediate friends and stuff to have a deep conversation with you about this kind of stuff, you'll see that it's woven everywhere. It's I snapped at like 11 years old, and I just detached. Like, there really was no more kid. The kid died.
Right.
The kid died. I still played hoop and everything, and I went to a new school and I didn't fit in, and like socially awkward. It was really rare for children to live with their fathers because like my parents had just gotten divorced, and like I had to choose where to live. I chose my dad. It was very rare that fathers had the kids, and went to new school. Talk about trauma, I just didn't fit in. Like playing basketball was the only thing I had in common, or the only skill. I wasn't really socially. It just was hard. It was completely hard because like these cliques and these crews were already made before you got there, and you're trying to get in to this clique and this crew, and like.
And as a kid, you can't understand
And
why.
like, but the thing is, I was very smart. I'm like, I'm not gonna fucking sell myself to fucking hang out with a bunch of punk motherfuckers. So I'll go collect baseball cards and be by myself and play hoops like down in the city, and like fuck all y'all from Royal Oak and Huntington Woods and Berkeley. I just detached from that, and I found like you're always gonna find your own where you fit in, your own vibration.
But you can't, because fuck all them is still part of the ego, right?
Yeah.
When you're saying fuck all them, when you're a kid, you're not, because I didn't walk away from anything spiritually. It was fuck all them, fuck them.
Yeah.
They're against me. They're against me.
It wasn't
The
that they
world's
were against me. It's just like
You just didn't fit.
I didn't fit, and it was interesting because
But
like
it alienated you, right?
yeah, and then I ended up meeting like my like stepbrother, soon to be stepbrother, about a year later. Hung out with him. He had the same issue as I did. Didn't really fit in. He was a transplant from Colorado trying to go to like West Bloomfield High. Totally didn't fit in. Ended up going to Waterford Mott. And it's different how social classes and all that ego shit when you're a kid, like you think it matters.
And you see where the lack of interdependence comes from, because you're so needy to be accepted by these peer groups that really have relevance because they exist, right? But in truth, they don't, because I didn't fit in either for a long time until I got to my junior year. I had my little clique of friends, but then I was like, fuck that, I'm gonna fit in. So I did shit to fit in.
Ninth
forced myself.
grade, I was sitting in freshman orientation, and this kid comes by and was like, "Dude, what's your name?" And I told him. He's like, "Well, me and my brother are gonna go drink some beers and smoke some weed and go 4-wheel, and he's got a Bronco. He's got like a '79 Bronco. You want to go?" I was like, "Hell yeah, I do."
Speaking my language.
Speaking my language, and he ended up being my best friend, who ended up passing away when I was 21. But it was interesting because he came from a family of 13 brothers and sisters. So
Was he Catholic?
he
Or his
wasn't, but
family?
his family was
That's what I
all
thought.
100% Irishman. 100%
Okay, there
Irishman.
you go. I'm not making
And,
fun of it. It's just when you hear
yeah.
13 brothers and sisters, it's usually Catholic.
Yeah. And it's funny because his mom was the first one to take me to Church of Today.
Oh, no shit.
She was a minister there when Jack Boland was there.
Nice.
And it was before, that coffee shop and the
Mary Ann Williamson.
it was before the expansion. It was just a small brick building before the
Yeah, yeah.
expansion. And I remember going to this church, and it was small, and I remember like, what's this? Like I ain't never seen no church like this before. And man, she she was wild, but she hooked me up with like a lot of spiritual knowledge, which at that time I really needed because I was spiritually thirsty, but I was smoking a lot of weed and I was drinking a lot and I didn't like too many people and I was angry. But I always had some sort of faith in something, like something. So she would always kind of hook me up with these books and stuff, and like, it was just he showed me something that I'll take with me for I hope as many lifetimes as I can. Is he really allowed me to like be me?
He allowed
To-
you the space to grow.
To like this kid would sing Cecilia down the hall in high school and not give a shit, and I watched him be so wild and so free that like I had to be that myself, and I live that way today.
All of Wayne Dyer did a study, who's also churchy today, by the way. But he did a study on, I think in the book Wisdom of the Ages, where I think 60 of the greatest thinkers, speakers of all time, Jesus, Martin Luther King, Gandhi, Mother Teresa, he went to, I think she was there. But anyway, there were 3 common traits that all of them shared across the board. That was 1, they were unattached to the good opinion of other people. 2, they were unattached to power. They weren't driven by power.
Flows freely.
And 3, they were unattached to outcomes. So that's where that freedom is. The only way, so we can't make the mean kids, and we've all been that too at certain points. We can't make them be spiritual minded. We can't make them be the way we would like them to be. But what we can do is center ourselves in ourselves and find ways to be free. And that's through non-attachment. That's where interdependence comes from. I don't expect you to be anything but what you are. And whatever you are that you give to me, it's not going to crush me because I don't have any expectations. So whatever the fuck you are, I can deal with it. I wish I knew that when I was a kid. It would have prevented so much suffering.
I don't think I could have comprehended that as a kid.
I couldn't. No, and I don't know that we're supposed to.
Right.
Right.
Exactly.
This is part of the journey, but
Yeah.
yeah. So, what are we?
We got a couple minutes.
Couple minutes. Got anything in closing?
No, not really.
Yeah, I have something for you to tell, actually. Is there a resource that people can use to find more out about interdependence? I know there's a book that I know.
Yeah, well, one of the best books I've read on the subject is 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by
I'll put that
Stephen.
up on Twitter for everybody, too.
Yeah, Stephen Covey. And there's another one that's really, really good too, and it delves into science. I'm always looking at. I love science. It's spiritual practice for me. But it's called The Honeymoon Effect by Bruce Lipton. Amazing book. If you're looking, if you're having problems in any relationship, marriage or otherwise, I highly recommend you read The Honeymoon Effect by Bruce Lipton. Amazing book.
You got that book?
I do. I don't know if I have it at the house though. I keep buying copies and giving it out, so
Yeah.
I don't know if it's there. But
Bruce Lipton, I'm seeing him a lot lately.
he's amazing.
Seeing a lot of his stuff.
Yeah, I like his stuff. Molecular biologist turned spiritualist. All right, well,
Just want to let everybody know that you can hit us up on Facebook during the show and be part of the conversation. You can also hit us up on Twitter, which was HC Podcast 313. If you want to reach out to us. It's
And the
always great
Instagram.
hearing from other people.
in the Instagram, so not just here. This is ongoing. Keep the questions, the comments coming, the inboxes. This is why we're doing it, to keep the conversation moving and maybe be a little bit of light.
Change the